Welcome to our 58th episode of Reaching Minds Thoughts for Our Life's Journey podcast. In this episode, we will be exploring how accessing our subjectivity can be a starting point for both personal and business strategy. We will also be discussing how subjectivity, driven by our nervous system processing of seeing, hearing, and feeling, is a crucial for effective strategy for understanding individual preferences and internal codes that can lead to more successful outcomes. Today, I'm joined by Joe Pritchard, who I've known for at least 30 years, if I can recall, who is a founder and a partner at Zetetic, which means proceeding with an inquiry. Joseph works with CEOs as his clients to build long-term business value through strategy, integrating subjective science with objective analysis to solve critical and personal business problems. Joseph has worked with almost every type of business, including corporate, startups, social enterprises, and high-profile individuals. Welcome, Joe.
Welcome, Nita. Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. I mean, I've had amazing coaching from you, Joe, that I still talk about to this day, about how I couldn't do scuba diving until I did some work with you around that. So it still resonates with me, and I did do it. So, it's a testament to your work with me that I know it has amazing impact. So, and I'm always grateful to conquering my fear around scuba diving or not being able to scuba dive. Now, I'm really interested in this subject around subjectivity. So, in order for our listeners to really kind of understand around this, what do you mean by subjectivity?
Yes, good question. So I'm talking about personal experience and the how the nervous system plays its role in the articulation of our personal experience. So that is what I call subjectivity. And because it would therefore be easy to dismiss it as a bunch of opinions, I've sort of gone into how can I do that scientifically? Or how can I do that scientifically? So that's what I mean by it, if that explains it, does it?
I think so, but I guess people who are not so technically minded, Joe, what would it mean for them, around subject to? How could you break that down for them? Because I know we referenced in the introduction about seeing, hearing, and feeling.
Yeah.
Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. Can I tell you why I decided to go in that direction?
Yes, sure. Yeah, go for it.
So, as you've already said, I work in commercial, corporate type. I work in business environments, and I've pretty much worked in strategy, one way or the other, brand strategy, business strategy, that kind of thing. Uh, most of my life, and what I observed was that strategies would break down, and I thought, well, where do they break down? And the pressure points come in the execution, but the observable activity is normally a difference of opinion. And I wondered whether people actually understood each other, whether they'd explain themselves sufficiently in the first place.
Mhm.
Uh, so, because so typically you might get two directors or two partners, and they're at loggerheads, and they've decided it's a personality issue. And my observation was, well, it can't be that. It must be that they're just not understanding each other. So that's one frame. The other frame was I wanted to understand how I was working. I wanted to understand my own mechanisms. So that took me in the direction of different explorations, one of which was, I'll name it now, neurolinguistic programming, which says it is the study of the structure of subjective experience. And I thought, oh, right, there's a structure, right? Um, and it sort of, then it boils down to um, our nervous system essentially is, I think everybody accepts that we have a nervous system which sees information, hears information, feels information. And what do we do with, are we aware that we are receiving information like that? Are we aware that we are articulating information in that language of seeing, hearing, and feeling? Um, so I have an experience. My How do I explain that? And if I wanted to explain it to you, I would be using a certain type of language. So I might be seeing you on screen as I am now. I might be listening to you on screen. And I don't mean this to sound a bit pedestrian, but it is sort of like this. In my nervous system, I'm seeing you. Somebody else might actually be listening to you,
Yes.
right? And there is the difference. We're both on the same podcast. We're both having a different experience based on the modality we're using to access the information. So um, I found it fascinating because I thought, how does this apply in commercial situations? Um, Yeah, I mean, that's what got me interested. So way back in the day, I used to, if it's all right to go back, I used
Mm.
to play as a teenager. I did a lot of sport. And the thing about team sports is that you have to cooperate to win. And then I came through my teams and went to, after university, I went to work in the marketing department of a brewery. Um, and my observation was that what I perceived ne- the basic ingredient was cooperation, but what I saw was conflict and competition. And I thought I was, and this threw me off. I thought we're not going to win anything if we are constantly arguing with each other. So I sort of got interested. I got interested that way in this area, and my communication wasn't that great. Right. So I had a strong feeling sense, a strong physical presence. It showed itself in sport. I had a strong instinct, which showed itself in the reactions of in a sporting environment. But when I went into the business environment, it was conversational. This was not my strong point. I didn't know how to put my point of view. At the same time, I've got this slight volcano of energy going through my body, which I might employ in a sporting environment, And so I had a good instinct, but I couldn't explain myself. It was frustrating, and I would listen to the argument. So this is I'm working in marketing. We're working with the top agencies in London, highly articulate people. They come along to your meeting, and you come out of the meeting not knowing why you've agreed what you've agreed, right? At least that's the way it was for me. Um, and I also was aware that I could be inarticulate, almost immobile. until suddenly I was very mobile and overexpressive as my words fought to get out. And then after about 10 years, someone said to me, perhaps you ought to do something about it. uh, and I thought, okay, well, what can I do? And this area called neuro-linguistic programming came across my radar, and I went and I started by going on the foundation skills and the practitioner skills training in that area. And what it allowed me to do was to understand that my world and my experience was different to someone else's world and someone else's experience. I thought, right, I need to understand their world and their experience and how they're communicating that before I start explaining mine. This was a sort of radical shift. So I used to work with some people, one person, I won't name them, that they were what I would now call highly visual. They moved at a rate of knots, and the ideas were popping all the time. And I was inert. I was the kind of person that sat down still and didn't say anything and read things. I can imagine this was like two ships passing in the night. Once I understood that this person was speaking a different language, I moved to it. And for the first time in about 5 years, we started to get along. I made the shift. Um, so in my nervous system, I'm processing things in my physical limbs and in my feelings. And when I meet someone who's processing things in their ideas, visual ideas, it is like we don't speak the same language. So in order to get along, I have to move. And that was my first sort of breakthrough. There's a structure to this. There's a structure to the way that I'm experiencing. There's a structure to the way they're experiencing based on the nervous system, seeing, hearing, and feeling, smelling and tasting, the others, but the five senses. And I wondered then, right, so what's happening when we do business strategy? And somebody gives their point of view, and then another person gives their point of view, and then there's an argument about points of view. I thought, do we actually understand what we're talking about? So if so I had a device which was language, and I had a structure which was the nervous system, and I started to track back what their what they were trying to explain about themselves as they were designing their strategy. Now, this is before you get to the numbers, okay? Because it's easy. You get the numbers, you say, we want a rate of return of 20% on capital employed. Which industries give us a rate of return on 20% I know, pharmaceuticals. Let's go into that industry. Well, yeah, that's great from a market segmentation point of view, but it isn't going to sustain the business. Because what sustains the business is the human spirit and their subjectivity, not the analytics. Okay. It's easy to make a mistake with market segmentation. I've done it. I've made that kind of error and recommended something that was absolutely wrong culturally for an organization because I hadn't spent enough time understanding what really turned them on, what really motivated them. And it's the same with it. So I found out after years, this is like decades of practical work. I found out that people do know what it is that they want if the conditions are there for them to discover it. And they will articulate it eventually through the nervous system. But there's just a gateway in. It's just a gateway in, if that makes sense. So that's quite a lot all at once. I'll stop there.
No, no, I completely understand that, and I relate to it because
Yeah.
what you're describing to me is a couple of things, which is being a highly kinesthetic person, feeling person.
Mm.
I know that, uh, you know, I'm slower in my processing anyway around things, and observing individuals who are highly visual, who tend to dominate the world of communication. In fact, a lot of our teaching and a lot of the world around us is built around highly visual thing. Well, anyway, that's my experience rather than, kinesthetic. And where I'm interested in, what you're saying just now is that understanding that is the gateway. So what's beyond the gateway in that case?
Okay, well, I'll go back into a close to client situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, most things that a client says to begin with. So I've got another model of the world, which is that we're dealing with a number of different capacities. So we have a mental capacity, we have an emotional capacity, we have a physical capacity. It's a bit similar to what I've just said, but there is a world that recognizes these things, and there is a more almost invisible unified capacity. And some people might call it the unified field. Some people might call it the soul. Some people might call it spirit. Some people might call it Atman. There is a place inside a person.
Mhm.
But how do you get there? If when you walk into a commercial situation, the head is in charge. The brain is working. Everything is fast. Decisions are being made, and the communication is coming, pre-packaged from up here,
Mhm.
right? When you want to get to something meaningful about a situation, it's generally not the answer. It's what's already known. They already packaged it. They've got the answers ready, right? This is my sort of like take on it, really. Um, and if they want to resolve a problem, the problem isn't going to be resolved by doing more of the same activity. That is thinking. So I want to take them to something other parts of the body, which they have. So we have the emotional body, the center of which is the heart, is recognized as uh, it is it's where we fall in love, you know, in the heart. And I think we fall in love because we fall out of the head just long enough to fall in love with someone. And then we have what the Japanese call the hara, so which is the center of as far as they're concerned, the energy body in the hara, and we all have those. And I also, because of my own experience, would say that we also have um, an atman or a soul or a very refined energy inside ourselves. And I want to go in that direction because that's where the real information is about that person wants to represent. So how do I do that? I know that can't do it by going in and just saying what I've said to you. The conversation would almost certainly be over. Right? So I meet them where they are and they talk. So businesses in business people talk. So I get involved with their language. And I ask them, I'm not going to go into all of the sort of conditions that you need, but you know that if you watch two children, if they trust each other, they'll play with each other. And it's the same with two adults. If they trust each other, they'll play. And someone who runs a business will answer questions if they trust you, basically. If they think that you're not going to make a fool of them as they explore the ideas, basically. Um, and as if you ask me a question, as which you're doing, I can't help but internalize and look at my experience. It's a natural process. If you ask me questions for an hour, I'm going to loosen up, they might call it. I might then trip over something of value for the conversation, which will be located somewhere else in my body. probably in my emotional body or in the way that I start moving my hands around the place. So I use conversation to go in that direction, and I use questions because they don't interfere with the other person's experience. I do not interfere at all with the other person's experience. I don't have an opinion. It
So
doesn't
how
ma-
do you I get that. So how do you then, if you're okay, if you're with a client
Yeah.
and you're using their language and you're asking them questions, how do you get them moving from their kind of logical mind
Yeah.
to more of a heart center where the could be where the answer is? So how do
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I do that.
get them to that place?
Well, conversation naturally leads them to tripping over their emotions if it's a meaningful conversation. But if they won't do it, I'll ask them to how they feel about it. And depending upon their relationship with their feelings, they will find that easy or they will find it difficult. Men will often be suspicious of the fact that you've introduced feelings because they don't have the currency. They maybe come into that a bit later on. They're not used to it unless they're with their beloved. If they're with their beloved, they might show their beloved, but they're not going to show another man, right? not in a not in a hurry.
No, no. So I guess, Joe, you work with CEOs, and majority of the CEOs are men.
Mm.
Uh, in your experience, maybe. Um, so I'm sort of curious is, well, how do you get them to open up and engage with their emotions when it's a place they don't go? There's a phrase that my cousin used to say, you know, just don't go there. So how do you, I guess what I'm thinking is, how do you build trust enough in order for you and the other person to explore this uncharted, unexplored territory that they've never kind of peeped at much?
Yeah. Okay. It's good. Quite. I mean, yeah. So not all people will be attracted to this work. It's worth saying. Um, um, so it's not all people will be attracted, but this is the point. They've got a problem. They haven't solved it. Do they want to continue not solving it? Or do they want to consider another way of looking at it? And if they want to keep their problem, we obviously don't have a discussion. But if they want to consider that there are other ways of coming at the problem, this is one of them. So it depends upon whether they want to solve the problem or not. Right. So let's assume they want to solve the problem. Now, I do work because of your comment about male CEOs. Women are quite often attracted to this work, female CEOs, because they're comfortable with their feeling body. It's not a shock to them. In fact, sometimes it's a relief to them, right? It's another part of our intelligence that we have available to us. And the men will go there. Um, and then you've got the whole set of skills that you might learn in something like neuro-linguistic program, which is about rapport, which I'm going to summarize as modeling. If you're modeling another person's experience and they can see that you are genuinely modeling their experience and feeding it back to them and still modeling their experience and feeding it back and still modeling their experience, and you never utter an opinion about what you're paying attention to, they will give you more. It really is down to the skill of the practitioner in that regard. They will give you more. And once they start giving you more, they fall out of headquarters. They automatically go into their body and they go into their feeling nature and their physical nature. And so they start to access these, like these other capabilities that they have, which they haven't accessed and are part of the solution to the predicament that they brought to the table. So there has to be a certain amount of humility on their part that they haven't been able to solve it, and there might be a way, which is not something that they're used to doing, um, might help. And I do remember speaking with one CEO who said, "This felt a bit awkward to begin with, but once I got used to it, it started to give him answers that he wasn't getting." Because the deeper structure of us as human beings is what moves us, right? Not the fast talk. Fast talk, I'm saying that in a slightly pejorative way, but the deeper structure is what moves us, and it has a message, it has a voice it wants to give. And it might just come out in, I want top, top, top standards. But when someone says that and the whole body is connected to that phrase, and all of the feeling nature is coherent with that phrase. In other words, when the words and the feelings and the body agree, you've got something. And that's the bit they've not been able to get to. And they're not able to get to it because they start with objectivity. This is my hypothesis. But has this worked? I mean, yes. I can quote one that's in the public domain. Eden Project. When I met them, we worked on a new strategy. It took about 7 or 8 years, right? This didn't happen overnight because there are certain people involved. There are certain uh, there are people with there are certain people involved, so it didn't happen overnight. But Eden Project has moved from one destination down in Cornwall. It's now got, I think it's at least 15, possibly more than that, around the world, which would not have happened without doing this work with a person called Gaynor Coley, actually, who was the managing director at the time, because the deeper structure had a picture, but it took a long time for that picture to come out and be all right. And that picture happened to model startup management and monetization in a business context.
Right.
So the picture then, which came from deep structure, had okay, we've got startup skills, we're a bit poor on the management skills, we could beef up on that, and we're not monetizing the know-how that we have in this enterprise called Eden. This is my take on it. All right, I'm saying this for the first time in public. Okay,
Right.
but I do have videos of Gaynor Coley alluding to the work that we've done, so I know it's sort of public.
Hmm.
Um, we would not have got there uh, in any traditional way.
Great. Great. And now, clearly, you were able to build rapport with her and get her to access a kind of deeper bodily experience that in order for her to build a, a kind of a global organization.
Yeah, to be able to articulate it. It wasn't
Yeah.
articulated. So if it's not articulated, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to happen. So the benefit of is articulating that deep articulating that deep structure. So I'm just sort of and this is um, the if you ask me what I want, I can't tell you. Oh my God, hang on a minute, let me go and look it up. I wrote it down last year. But if you spend some time asking me what I want, and let's say I say freedom,
Mm.
that is actually what I want, right? I want to be free. So how can I be free? Well, I've learned how to be free, and it isn't by looking at external reference points, right? But it's taken me about 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is to say, oh, right, I know where that freedom is. I know how to build that freedom. And then I can say, okay, how do I as a person remain free in the work that I'm doing?
Mm.
Yeah, so that I don't sell myself out. So why do I say that? Is because when I first went to work, I sold myself. I gave away a bit of myself to someone else's authority.
So are we here talking about non-verbal intelligence, Joe?
Well, definitely non-verbal intelligence is, yeah, yeah. So the non-verbal intelligence does have a voice. Have you got the patience to go looking for that voice of that non-verbal intelligence? Whatever
So
you want to call it. Yeah.
so what did you do? So in order for you not to sell your soul, and if freedom is
Yeah.
what you wanted,
Yeah.
what are you qualitatively doing differently now than you did maybe at the beginning of your career?
I thought that other people knew better.
Ah.
And so when I came from Yorkshire, went to London. I mean, London to me was absolutely beautiful. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, given where I'd come. God, wow, here I am. Um, Thought that these people who worked in London, because of, I thought, well, they know better than me.
Mm.
I'm going to put my views, put myself aside for a bit and learn. Um, and what I observed was that they were kind of crossing they were crossing kind of almost like invisible fabrics in myself that I felt uncomfortable with. And I thought, oh, no, I don't know. I don't know about this. The way they might talk to people, gossip, you know, is gossip can be really cruel.
Mm.
But gossip is also, I observed it as a tool. I observed people employing gossip with a purpose of undermining other people, and this sort of I didn't like it. But I thought, is this the way I've got to behave? I really did have to consider this. I thought maybe I don't know. Anyway, you can imagine what might happen. So after about 10 years of that, I got ill, right? And I thought, right, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not. The soul has to be central to my way of being.
Mm.
It just has to be there. And I then found a group of people who sort of broadly agreed with that, and I started a new career. And that new career was looking at personal development is the best way of describing it. Accountability, responsibility. And these were ideas that I thought, yeah, that rings a bell with me. That's I feel how it should be. And so I started to explore personal responsibility, accountability, and then I hit another barrier, which is how do I communicate all of this? I learned the NLP was amazing, not in terms of my experience, but in enabling me to be functional and practical in the world that I was living in, and also then to start to see where the blockages were because I saw where they were in me, and I started to look at other people, and then you can stop me anytime you like. And I just took that deeper and deeper, and we can come back to that.
So how so your kind of original when you said when you started working
Yeah.
is you defer to others. So
Yes.
so are you saying over the years you stopped deferring to others
Yes.
and so how did you how did
Where
you
did I
do
go?
that differently?
I developed my internal state and I paid attention to it.
Right.
I said, it's happening in here. I know where the source of my intelligence is. I'd done lots of things by this time. And I thought, yeah, actually, that thing, that intuition, that nudge, that is actually my intelligence. I better pay attention to it. Now, when I was playing football, I paid attention to it because that's what made you good at your job at football. You know, it meant not everybody likes football, I know, but it was a team game, and
Yeah.
I thought, right, okay, your instincts or your some other intelligence would move you faster than your brain could think. Right. So I then go, okay, what is that? So that took me in the direction of eventually meditation, and I started to become accustomed to who I am rather than having someone else tell me who I am. And then it didn't really matter. All the things that I used to be concerned about didn't really matter, you know. And I also know from working consistently as a practitioner with other people that most of the stuff that comes out first isn't relevant. It's just what they've got going on in their head.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's probably what they're used to in terms of their own patterns,
Yes.
or that's what they need to be doing. And I
Yeah.
guess, you touch on personal development, and,
Yeah.
you and I and others
Yeah.
like us have been doing this for a very long time,
Right. Yeah.
and and we're open to it. We can go inside ourselves, even though sometimes we might get in our own way. But we can go. We have that technology or the access. How do you, I guess, begin to encourage others who are maybe are only staying at that kind of superficial, logical level of, seeing the world in a particular way?
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite difficult because every time I have that conversation with someone who's not really interested, it goes nowhere. So, really, so I had a crisis and I knew I had to do something differently.
Mm.
And this seems to be the case. If you put it, businesses don't talk to me, and they don't talk to me unless there's a crisis of some kind or another. No matter how they patch it up, no matter how they present it, there is a crisis. Otherwise, then they're not talking to me, right? And that gets crises gets people to move. So on a personal level, it got me to move. It got me to do something, and in a commercial situation, it gets those other people to move. So, and normally people who've got to the top of a business, they're capable. You know, they go, oh well, actually, maybe there's something I don't know. Some of them do actually, encourage that idea. But I'm not sure I answered your question. But it's a bit like if you've got the life you've got, and you want it, and you don't like it, something's got to shift. The answer is internal. So what are how does one access the resources that are internal to enable us to flower, if you like? Um, and it's, in my opinion, it's the starting point in a business as well. Did that answer your question or not?
Well, I think so, actually. I think so. I guess, where I was trying to
Yeah.
maybe navigate is, in a previous podcast I did, we talked about, and I think you're touching on this because I think there are some parallels about growth mindset and fixed mindset. So, there may be CEOs who are very bright, intelligent, able, and we've seen plenty of examples in the corporate world over the years. IBM, Kodak, all of those organizations who might have had, nah, this idea of digital cameras won't work, or Apple isn't going to be the market player challenge for us as competitors. Um, I guess it's getting those individuals to kind of shift their thinking, because maybe the organization is not growing as fast as it can do, and maybe they're the block in it. Maybe they don't have the whole vision or purpose that they need to take the organization to another level. and there is a crisis because of that, because y the, not the stakeholders, the, shareholders might be going, "Ah, you need to move fast, you need to grow." Um, I guess for me, where I'm curious is how do you get someone to shift? How do you get someone to say, "I need to start thinking differently. I need to pay attention to my own intelligence." Sorry, I'm going in a roundabout way to
No,
get
that's
there.
all right. Yeah. Well, if there's a crisis there, and are they, how do you get them to pay attention? Well, they suspect that something can be, if they're in the position where they suspect that something can be done, so they're not in denial. Right. So if you've got an addiction, the first problem with an addiction is accepting that you have an addiction. If you've got an addictive way of thinking in an organization, the first problem they've got to accept is that they're denying the way that they're thinking or the way that they're going about it. So if they can accept there is a problem, 50% of the energy, in a sense, comes back into the individual. They go, oh, right, I accept that there's a problem. I'm going to do something about it. So with an addiction, it's getting to that point where you're no longer in denial. In an organization, I would imagine it's the same. They have to accept that there is something seriously wrong, systemically wrong with the way that they're going about things. And then they have to sort of take responsibility for that. And then they might initiate a corporate culture change, for example. So I'm reminded of going to India,
Mhm.
to Bangalore, to Hindustan Aeronautics. And I don't think I'm giving anything away here, but India at the time had a kind of copycat type manufacturing um, print, if you
Mm.
like. Um, um, and the people I went to see no longer wanted to be copycat. They wanted to be R&D focused, so that they would become the center of the advanced manufacturing.
Mm.
To do that, they recognized they needed to change, quote unquote, the mindset. Yeah. So they took NLP in at a corporate level and
Mhm.
they trained lots of different people, uh, um, managing directors and engineers and that kind of thing, in this new technology, which creates R&D. It creates new ideas. It creates innovation. NLP can be used to create innovation. Yeah. And I believe they did it. We went back a few times, but I believe they did it for about 5 years or 10 years, something like that, with a view to changing the mindset of the organization. Yeah.
And did they?
Uh, I believe they're satisfied with what they did. Yeah. I mean, I can't answer that with any more detail because I don't know specifically, not because I'm being coy, not because I'm being coy. Um, but it was a great experience because I've never seen anything like it in my life, apart from when I worked at programs in London. This was an organization dedicated to learning and development with a view to changing the commercial positioning of the organization of the markets they were in, which were aeronautics. You know, um, I'd never come across anything like it, and they also took me to meet the Secretary of State for the state that we were in,
Mm.
and he was saying the same thing. And he indicated to me that the country had a learning and development long-term goal to restore India to its pride of place in the world. Right. That was phenomenal. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Unashamedly, that's what they want to achieve.
Mm.
Right. And so they had a strategy and so mindset, I find uh, I like what I when I come across come across those words, I don't understand them actually. I don't understand that word. And I don't want my mindset. I don't want it set. I want my body to be organic, you know. Um, but I can't comment because I don't know that. I mean, I did hear parts of that podcast, but I'd rather. I've just got a different view on how to approach that kind of thing. I think.
No, 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 it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
So, someone listening to this
Yeah.
podcast today,
Yeah.
how can individuals begin to do this? What you're sort of say, accessing their other intelligence and their non-verbal intelligence, and like you were sort of saying, you wanted freedom. So let's say I wanted freedom.
Yeah.
How do I begin to unpack that for myself so that it becomes a reality
Oh,
rather than a conceptual thing?
yeah. Well, am I free? You know, who's in charge of my thinking? Am I in charge of it, or is somebody else in charge of it? Oh, I didn't even know I was thinking. Right. Yeah. Then I don't have a sort of a quick answer.
No, no, no.
I knew that I had to do something with my life and point it in a certain direction. To do that, I had to learn certain skills, which ranged from business skills. So I did an MBA. I knew I had to have the language of the boardroom. I learned neuro-linguistic programming skills because I was not good at communication, and it gave me this prize called modeling, which I've used in lots of different ways. When you start modeling, it's just a doorway to shattering identity and that kind of thing. It's fantastic. And I also knew I still didn't kind of like know enough, and I went off on this Tibetan pulsing kind of industrial cleaning of the nervous system. So
Wow.
I was curious about my nervous system, right? Have I got something to do with it? Or am I just a victim of my nervous system?
Mm.
And then you have a model, which is everyone's got a model, but this is a practical work. It's not something you get if you do intellectually. You don't get it until you do it. Um, but yeah, in their model, like everything is remembered by the body.
Yes. I agree with that.
That right. The actual microchip for that information's in the eye,
Oh,
right?
did not know that.
So all the organs, according to them, register in the eye, right? So then you've got a map, and then they've got pulsing. What they call it's a bodywork of the heart. So it's using the heart pulse beat and the electricity that generates to clear certain circuits in the body related to certain organs which have certain attributes. So it gets a bit, it's quite detailed.
Mm.
Effectively leaves you in a deep meditative state, really, and you're in a no mind state. So you're out of headquarters, right? So how do you sort of go about this? I think it'll vary for each individual because mine was a very personal journey. I was the one that was inarticulate. Um, and I just went towards anything that helped me understand what was happening inside my body. So I didn't know, for example, that I couldn't speak without using words generated through the senses. Well, amazing, isn't it?
Mm.
You go, really? The senses build up our nervous system, and the words that we use describe our senses. So our words are like one step away from our senses. And then our senses, I believe, are one step away from that real non-verbal intelligence.
So
And
what
that
would be an example of that, Joe? Sorry. What would be an example of that?
of what? Which
Of the senses that, saying one step. So what would you be doing the words that originate from the senses?
Well, words originate from the senses. I see you.
Ah, okay. So we're going back to
We're
seeing,
going
feeling, and
see
hearing.
if you're hearing. Yeah.
Ah, okay, okay.
I can't. how I express myself is based on me seeing you,
Yeah.
hearing you, feeling, and all of that kind of thing. So, and the senses are our mechanism for that. They are that bridge. And they're not always, if they're charged, they're not always reliable. So I was in a pulsing workshop, and this is a body work. So imagine you're lying on the floor, fully
Mhm.
clothed on the floor. Someone is pulsing, holding certain points on your body, and it's generating a certain pulse. You have a certain experience. It goes on for a period of time, and the electrical and the pulse beat clears things uh, without you being awake and without you talking about them. But you can see them clearing. You can actually see the video of something clearing in your head, right? Right. So it doesn't need any. It you know it's kind of a non-verbal way of clearing stuff.
Right.
Um, but when you if there's any charge in the system for any reason, let's say you've been beaten up when you were younger by somebody who looked a certain way, and you come out. I once came out of that sort of rather deep state, and my nervous system was jangled. It's the best way of putting it. And I looked at someone and I thought they were making fun of me. And I was you're in a meditation hall, right? I'm 1 second away from having a fight. You know? And then, but of course, I'm in a meditation hall, so I sat still and I watched it run. And in a few seconds, it completely cleared, and there was nothing there. There was just uh, complete calm. So I knew that my nervous system was dictating my responses to what I was seeing.
Right. So,
So
which I think is quite interesting because it sounds to me that it's a bit like fight, flight, and freeze. So that when you're in that meditative state, when you were, and that got act triggered for you. This is my
yes,
language.
yeah,
That you might have gone down the road of attack, but you
yes,
didn't because you
yes,
were in a kind of a different meditative state.
yes. And as a result of that, I've learnt to wait when those kind of strong triggers run, because I've seen that they're not real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're not.
I I I recognize that because I know that sometimes when I have a very belly response to things, I need to
Yeah.
sit with it as opposed to uh, what my body wants to do is to expel it.
Yeah.
But if I sat with it, it either dissipates or it gives me some wisdom through that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the yeah, and you know, no, I didn't, answer your question. I didn't come across that immediately. It took me blocks of 10 years to get into these positions. It might take a monk, a lot. It might be a lot faster, but these are skills, that sort of self realization skills, I'm going to call them, that I think are useful for leaders
Yeah, or individuals even.
or
So
individuals even.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap this up, Joe,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
one question that I always ask my guest is, what's the motto do you have for yourself that you live by?
Oh, try not to have an opinion.
Right. So that's your, oh, okay. So try not to have an opinion.
Gets me to trouble.
And if you had, so if you had to give, oh, that's a good one. If you had, challenging for me,
Yeah.
if you had a piece of wisdom that you could share with our listeners, what would that be?
I kind of want to go, oh no. Like,
That's cool as well.
yeah. Um, uh, I mean, as I get older, I find that I don't really know much. Um, really, it's there's it's an exponential curve. I don't really know much, but the answers on the inside basically is the starting point. And you know, when I was young, had a religious education when I was young, and I was always looking for God because God was always part of a religious conversation. God, as they were called then, and they would say, "God is everywhere. God is everywhere." And I was trying to capture God in the cup, in the teacup. I'd put the teacup lid on top. I said, "I've caught God," right? Anyway, um, and I spent a long time looking for an answer to that question outside of myself,
Yeah.
in including all of things I've just talked about. And I found out that it isn't there, it's inside. And that is the most beautiful, nourishing thing that I've experienced. So that's where I would point people, really.
I think that's beautiful,
Yeah.
Joe, because I would say that that is often the starting point for all of us. Is it's not external always. There's things that we need to do, the work within ourselves that often has the answers. If we sit still long enough, or if we listen to ourselves long enough, or whatever we need to do, there is a way of discovering ourselves. And, I guess I point to that because at the end of the day, we only have one life.
Yeah.
So, so thank you so much, Joe. It's been an interesting conversation. We haven't gone through the questions that we had spoken about, and I think it's been very rich, and it's brought in all the things that we were going to be talking about. So thank you so much.